Here's a question that might keep you up tonight. What if the difference between constant financial anxiety and actual peace of mind isn't winning the lottery or landing some six-figure job? What if it's just hitting one specific number in your savings account? I'm talking about the moment when you check your bank balance and instead of that familiar knot in your stomach, you actually feel calm. That number exists, and for most people, it's way lower than you think. My name is Phil, and I obsess over financial psychology and why certain people navigate money stress like it's nothing, while others spiral over a $200 unexpected bill. And if you've ever wondered what actually shifts when you cross different savings thresholds, make sure you smash that subscribe button because we're about to break down exactly how your brain rewires itself when you save your first $10,000. Let me describe a version of life you might recognize. You're standing in line at the pharmacy, and your card gets declined. Not because you're broke, but because you miscalculated by like $30, and now you're doing mental gymnastics trying to figure out which bill you can delay to make rent work. Or your friend group is planning a weekend trip, and you're immediately calculating whether you can swing it without completely destroying your budget for the next 2 months. So you make up some excuse about being busy when really you just can't justify spending $300 on something fun when your savings account is sitting at $147. This is the reality when you're running on financial fumes. Every decision becomes this high-stakes calculation. You're not thinking about building wealth or investing in opportunities. You're just trying to make it to Friday without something breaking that you can't afford to fix. Your entire relationship with money becomes defensive, reactive. You're constantly playing this exhausting game of financial Tetris, trying to make the pieces fit before everything collapses. But here's what shifts when you accumulate that first $10,000. The first thing that changes isn't what you buy, it's how you breathe. I'm being serious here. When you have zero cushion, your body exists in this constant state of low-grade panic. You know that feeling when someone walks up behind you unexpectedly? That little adrenaline spike? That's basically how your nervous system responds to every financial decision when you're broke. But when you've got 5 figures sitting in your account, your whole threat detection system recalibrates. That check engine light that used to trigger immediate panic, now it's just an annoying task on your to-do list. You're frustrated, sure, but you're not catastrophizing about how you'll survive the month. Here's something wild that researchers have documented. People with emergency funds have measurably lower stress hormones. Like, you can literally test someone's cortisol levels and see the difference between someone with savings versus someone without. This isn't just feeling better. Your body chemistry actually changes. And this creates this fascinating ripple effect most people never connect to their bank balance. Think about the last major decision you made at work. Maybe you stayed quiet in a meeting when you disagreed with your boss. Maybe you didn't push back on unfair treatment. Why? Because deep down, you knew you couldn't risk losing this job. You need this paycheck too desperately to rock the boat. But when you've got $10,000 saved up, that same conversation hits different. You're not suddenly going to tell your boss to shove it, but you might actually speak up when it matters. You might negotiate harder for that raise. You might take a calculated risk on a new opportunity because losing your job isn't an immediate disaster anymore. This is what I call walking away money. And it doesn't just change your career trajectory, it changes how people treat you. There's this confidence that comes from knowing you have options, and people pick up on that. Your boss notices when you stop operating from desperation. Potential employers sense when you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. Even in your personal relationships, you carry yourself differently when you're not financially fragile. Here's the part that might mess with your head a bit. The biggest benefit of having $10,000 saved isn't actually spending it. It's knowing you don't have to spend it. Most people who build up this cushion almost never touch it for emergencies. Know why? Because having that safety net somehow reduces the number of emergencies you experience. It's like this weird psychological phenomenon where financial security actually makes you luckier. What really happens is your decision-making improves across the board. You're not making desperate choices anymore. You can shop around for car insurance instead of just accepting whatever they quote you. You can wait for a good deal instead of panic buying the first option. You can invest in preventative maintenance instead of waiting for things to break. The money sitting in your account is literally working for you, even when you're not touching it, just by giving you the mental bandwidth to think clearly. Let's talk about what $10,000 actually covers in the real world, because this is where the magic really becomes obvious. Car repair? Unless you're replacing the entire engine, you're covered. Most automotive disasters fall somewhere between $800 and $2,500. With your cushion, this shifts from a life-altering crisis to a bad Tuesday. Medical emergencies? Even with mediocre insurance, most urgent situations can be handled. We're talking emergency room visits, minor procedures, urgent dental work. You're not covering major surgery here, but you're covering 95% of the health scares that pop up in normal life. Job loss? This is the big one. $10,000 buys you roughly 3 to 6 months, depending on your burn rate. But here's what's crucial. It's not just about surviving. It's about having the luxury to be selective with your next move, instead of grabbing the first offer out of desperation. And look, this is where things get interesting. Having this foundation doesn't just protect you from disasters, it actually creates opportunities that literally don't exist when you're broke. Maybe there's a certification that would bump your salary by $8,000 annually, but it costs $1,500 up front. Without savings? Impossible. With your cushion? It's a no-brainer investment that pays for itself in 3 months. Or your coworker mentions she's leaving to start a business and needs help getting it off the ground. Without savings, you can only offer moral support. With $10,000, you might be able to participate in something that could change your financial situation entirely. I'm not saying you should gamble your emergency fund on crypto or whatever, but having options feels completely different from having zero options. And those options compound in ways that are hard to predict, but impossible to ignore once you experience them. Here's something most financial advice completely misses. The hardest part of saving $10,000 isn't actually the discipline or the sacrifice. It's becoming someone who has $10,000 saved. Most people approach this like a crash diet. They cut everything aggressively for a few months, white-knuckle their way to some savings, then burn out and slide right back into old patterns. Why? Because they never actually changed their identity. They were just temporarily acting like a different person. But the people who successfully build this cushion, they're not trying to save money. They're becoming savers. This sounds like semantic nonsense, but it's everything. When you identify as someone who saves, you start noticing opportunities to reduce expenses that you were completely blind to before. You get creative about generating additional income. You start thinking in terms of years instead of weeks. And here's the beautiful part. It gets progressively easier. Your first $1,000? Brutal. It requires major lifestyle adjustments and constant willpower. But your second $1,000 is noticeably less painful because you've already built the habits. By the time you're working toward your seventh or $8,000, the whole process feels almost automatic. There's this threshold effect where you stop feeling deprived and start feeling smart. You're not sacrificing anymore, you're just making obvious choices that align with who you've become. Like, I know someone who told me the weirdest thing happened after she hit $10,000. She stopped wanting expensive stuff, not because she couldn't afford it, but because she'd gotten so good at distinguishing between what she actually valued versus what advertisers told her to want. This is the identity shift nobody talks about. You don't just get richer. You become a completely different type of person who thinks about money in a fundamentally different way. All right, let's get tactical. Here's exactly how you build your first $10,000 without losing your mind. Step 1. Open a high-yield savings account that's separate from your checking. Seriously, it needs to be separate. The psychological barrier of transferring money is crucial. You want it accessible for emergencies, but not so accessible that you dip into it for random purchases. Step 2. Calculate your actual monthly expenses down to the dollar. I mean, everything. Track every transaction for 30 days.
Most people have no clue where their money actually goes, and you can't fix what you can't see. Step 3. Set up automatic transfers the day after your paycheck hits. Start with whatever you can sustain. If that's $100 per month, fine. If it's $25, that's fine too. The amount matters way less than the consistency. At $200 per month, you'll hit $10,000 in about 4 years. At $400 per month, you're there in 2 years. Step 4. Every time you get unexpected money, tax refund, bonus, birthday cash, whatever, put half of it directly into savings before you have time to rationalize spending it. This dramatically accelerates your timeline without requiring additional monthly sacrifice. Step 5. Audit your recurring expenses every 3 months. Subscriptions you forgot about, insurance you could shop around for, memberships you're not using. Most people can find $100 to $200 per month in expenses that provide zero actual value. Redirect that money to your savings and watch your timeline compress.
Look, $10,000 isn't going to make you wealthy. You're not retiring to Bali or buying a yacht. But what it does is shift you from survival mode to opportunity mode, and that shift is worth more than the money itself. When you're not constantly gasping for financial air, you can actually think strategically about building the life you want instead of just reacting to whatever crisis pops up next. The person you become while saving your first $10,000 is infinitely more valuable than the $10,000 sitting in your account. You develop patience. You learn to distinguish between wants and needs. You build the confidence that comes from proving to yourself that you can achieve hard financial goals. If your bank balance currently looks more like a phone number from 1987, don't spiral. Start absurdly small if you need to. The key is starting and staying consistent, not heroic sacrifice that you can't sustain. Your future self, the one sleeping soundly at night without financial anxiety, is going to be incredibly grateful you started today.